So good morning or good early afternoon. I'm happy to be here and to present our work. This is joint work with Martin Lee from Freie Universität Berlin and my colleagues at DFKI Berlin, Julian Moreno-Schneider and Peter Bourgogne. As the chair of the session said, the title of the presentation is Curation Technologies for Cultural Heritage Archives. And the presentation is structured into four different parts that roughly translate into these 4 blocks. First, I'm going to talk briefly about curation technologies, what they are, a bit of background, some domains that we work on, and a few example applications. Then the original project, the original research project that created this data set that we're working with, this cultural heritage archive, the processing pipeline and the components listed here on the slide, and then afterwards a brief demo, pre-recorded demo of the interactive curation workbench. So we have worked on the topic of content curation, data curation, curation technologies now in several projects, and I just want to briefly highlight a couple of results that we achieved in these. This is we call it a Redaktionstool. It's like an authoring environment for web applications or mobile applications that was created together with the company DATeCH2019 in Germany. For the Germans among you, this is the company behind the Valomat that is used always before the elections to check your election tendencies. So this is an application. We built the base technology, DATeCH2019. They created the environment, the graphical user interface, to easily, based on semantic processing results, create and curate data sets into web applications. This is a second example, and then I'm going to stop with the company Art & Com, also based in Berlin. They are active in the sector of museums and exhibitions and showrooms, and they need software that enables their in-house generalist experts very, very quickly to get into and to drill down into vast collections of documents to get the facts out of them, because they are participating in many, many pitches, and they just need smart software for information extraction, and this is what we built with them. One of our current projects, Curator, was mentioned yesterday in the keynote by Reinhard Altenhöhner from the Staatsbibliothek. This is Curator. Only one slide on this new endeavor here. The objective of this project is to create an ecosystem for curation technologies, and we use this term, or we have been using this term since 2014, and we're trying to establish it and to promote it because we think that it's fitting. It's an appropriate term for data curation, content curation. So we promote curation technologies, and our goal in this project is to make the metropole region of Berlin-Brandenburg to be the hub of excellence for the development and industrial use of curation technologies. The Staatsbibliothek case was mentioned yesterday, so they are mainly involved in OCR technologies, combining AI and deep learning to improve OCR results. Essentially, our technology project or our development project at DFKI is also called the Content Curation Engine. So we are trying to build several different services, putting them together, and to provide a general purpose content curation system and platform. Just to provide a bit more overview, the previous project, Digital Curation Technologies, Curator, is the current project. Another current one is Lynx, where we work on legal documents, also a fascinating domain, legal domain, compliance and regulation. And we also have been working on digital libraries, on cinema. The film industry is also fascinating with many interesting use cases, customer relationship management, and last but not least, digital humanities and cultural heritage. And this is now the project that I'm briefly presenting now. This is one of the smaller ones that we've been doing in this space. So the original original research project was called, and we essentially at DFKI have nothing to do with it. I just presented briefly so that you are aware of what we are dealing with here. So there has been a project at Freie Universität Berlin, one of the Berlin universities, called Sharing German Government's Documents on Unification and Integration and Building a Database on German Unification. Interestingly enough, this was a project at the Institute of Korean Studies at the Freie Universität between 2010 and 2016, and was funded by the Ministry of Unification in Korea, South Korea, obviously. They have a ministry, many people don't know this, they have a ministry for the unification of the two Koreas. And they sent out, from Korea, they sent out colleagues and scholars and researchers into the world, into regions that have been previously separated and that are now reunited. And they want to collect best practices. And they did a big project at Freie Universität, which is also big on area studies, regional studies. And they collected official political documents regarding the German reunification process to make them available for research and planning processes in the context of a potential future reunification process of Korea. And these documents were collected, intellectually curated by specialists, a team of about 8 or 10 people, analyzed, interpreted, and then partially translated and published, and they are available at this URL here. So in the data set that we worked with, 51 volumes, mostly PDF files, and the colleagues said that this is the largest and most comprehensive manually curated data set on the German unification. It's also interesting for German researchers in this area, or researchers in Germany. It's a collection of transcripts of debates in the parliament, minutes of committee meetings, reports, proceedings. It's a fairly heterogeneous bunch of documents and document types and text types. All the primary documents written in German, obviously, and the researchers added summaries and analyses in both German and Korean. We're talking about 138,000 pages, nothing compared to the 13 meters of documents presented in the first presentation today. So only 138,000 pages in both German and Korean, with the majority in German, about 38 million words in total. So vast majority of files in PDF, with a couple of auxiliary documents in tables, Excel sheets, and so on. So what was our own objective in this working with this data set? So the Freie Universität Berlin, they approached us. We worked in different other projects together, and they said, hey, can we maybe use your tools and technologies to get a better glimpse and better grasp around this data set? And we said, sure, let's look at it. And the current state of play is that they publish and present the data set as PDF files and a little bit of HTML, and you can do a little bit of searching, but not really, online. So the options of navigating the data set are obviously limited. And we thought maybe we can do better with our tools, and let's see if we can do with limited effort. That's very important. With limited effort, provide a richer, interactive, more accessible interface to scholars who would like to work with this data set, because it took 6 years to build it and to curate it. So we wanted to develop a prototype of an interactive system, interactive platform for the semantic analysis, enrichment, visualization, and so on of the data set that goes beyond what PDF documents typically can do. With a focus on temporal, geographical, entity, and thematic contexts using our existing services. So our pipeline is fairly standard. We start with the data set, the PDF files. We do OCR using Tesseract in German and Korean. NER in German only. I will tell you in a minute why. We do entity linking to external ontologies like DBpedia and other ontologies available in the linked open data cloud. Then we do a little bit of clustering based on old school Weka. Then we produce an enriched data set. These are plain text files and NIF-based, that's an NLP interchange format, NIF-based JSON annotations. This goes into the interactive dashboard, which I will show to you in a minute. And then we need to just link back to the original file so that it's all integrated. The data set looks more or less like this, just a couple of sample documents, mostly readable PDF, so no bad scans that need to be de-warped and de-skewed and so on. So it's fairly good stuff, with usually typewriter fonts or standard fonts, with the occasional table, typically multi-column format, and also mixed German and Korean. We did a small evaluation because it was interesting to the colleagues at the Freie Universität to see how typical off-the-shelf OCR tools like Tesseract do. Turns out not too bad. We used Tesseract 4, the best LSTM model for German, and 3.5 for Korean, because the version 4 of Tesseract had segmentation errors and segmentation issues everywhere. Essentially no segmentation was applied. 3.5 then worked. And we did a small evaluation. Our ground truth was constructed using Transcribus and about 3,000 words in German and about 2,500 words in Korean, evaluated using OCR evaluation. This is what it looks like. The numbers are okay-ish for machine-readable one column and the typewriter scans, and they unfortunately inflate a little for the more for the more avant-garde formats like two columns and tables and so on. So the results here vary, and they are much better for German than for Korean. The main problem is in fact the formatting, and we could now do some training and perform other tricks and to improve these numbers, but it's not really necessary for our use case. So we just wanted to see how far can we go with off-the-shelf tools. Now we know. The majority of our data set is content in single column, and the pipeline relies on entity extraction. So it wouldn't be that much of a benefit for us if we now improve the numbers a little bit more. But we also provide one possible solution for this, and this you can see here on the slide using Tesseract and other output formats that are a bit more informative in terms of document structure. So NER and Entity Linking, specifically focusing upon persons, locations, and organizations in the plain text output generated by Tesseract, using, again, off-the-shelf tools that we have integrated in our system. OpenNLP NER for starters here for NER, trained with WikiNER, 1.1 million articles and 400 million tokens, because there was at least we haven't found any specific training data for this specific domain. The entity linking is performed with DBpedia Sparkle. There is an endpoint for that that provides easy access to additional information on entities by following the linked open data cloud, and we will replace this eventually with the GND, the gemeinsame Normdatei, which is designed for German and maintained for German, and which will provide much higher coverage, essentially. Yeah, clustering is rather old school, almost, in terms of the deep learning advances that have been published recently. So we just simply cluster the documents based on the URIs of spotted and linked entities using WICA and expectation maximization. And this allows theme-based access to the data set with certain regions and clusters of people and so on. It works surprisingly well. Hasn't been evaluated yet. We will do that in terms with the user study that will be performed eventually in the last part of the project. And it will also be complemented with a new topic detection service that we are currently working on in Curator. So Korean processing. It's difficult. It's complicated. So language technology support for Korean we find is very, very limited. We have been unable to find a readily available NER tool for Korean. I'm sure there is something somewhere, but we haven't found it yet. So this is why we had to do NER on German only. But we have an idea, and the idea is to use annotation projection as a means of enriching the Korean text with entities. Similar methods can be applied in machine translation, for example. So the idea is to use OpenNMT, which is an open machine translation, open neural machine translation toolkit, to translate Korean text into German, and then to project the German annotations of the entities onto the Korean text. So this will probably work, but only just a little bit, I assume. So just very briefly, a very, very brief overview of the workbench. You can see it here. Access to the different entities. We can cluster them with the typical word cloud, and we can go through the different documents in the and change the word cloud. These are the highlighted annotations, persons, locations, organizations. We can check out the different clusters. These are the different volumes here. And of course, we could foresee many, many additional visualization techniques based on the info that we have, based on the info that we generate and extract from the document collection. A little bit of file management is also included because originally we wanted to foresee a feature in which we enable users to upload their own data sets so that we can run them, but we abandoned that idea for now. But we will revisit that idea in Curator later on. So this is now the current state of play. As you can see, obviously, we still need to link in the PDF files, so this is still pending. But apart from that, most of the work is done. The clock is ticking ruthlessly, so just very briefly the summary. So we present in this paper, in this presentation, a dashboard for the curation of cultural heritage data. The goal is to provide an intuitive analysis, environment, exploration, visualization of data sets, and to add value for researchers by combining existing semantic components. And the key question is now, to what extent can off-the-shelf tools be used for this? As you know, and as we have seen in many presentations yesterday and today, current machine learning and deep learning tools and techniques rely on very, very large data sets, very large amounts of representative high-quality training data, and use of tools trained on general domain data or news data is always ambitious. Here it works surprisingly well. We have seen in the first presentation that I think Dutch documents that are 50 years old, 60 years old, there are already issues there. These documents are from the 90s, so it works. It kind of works. So generic processing results are good enough to develop useful curation dashboards that help users interested in further exploring a large data set. In terms of future work, the list is very, very long. I'm just showing you a couple of points. And also it's a very small project which is ending very soon, so we have to pick and choose what we really want to do when we finish up this project. The pipeline and the dashboard are still work in progress. What we definitely want to do and need to do is perform a user study to verify the usefulness of the tool. We need to add a few bells and whistles to the interface, show metadata created by the pipeline, expose everything that we have in meaningful ways to the user and through the graphical user interface, add the PDF files, of course. And then another point that I hadn't mentioned until now is that about half of the 51 editions have been translated into Korean. This is the first one here. So I think it's a full translation of the first volume of the German edition, which is now also available in Korea. And the colleagues from Freie Universität, Martin Lee from the Campus Bibliothek, told me that this project and the data set is super popular in Korea, and many people work with this. It's very interesting, not only for scholars, but also for the general public, for journalists, for the media. And here we want to explore if we can maybe, and given that language technology support for Korean is limited, and maybe we can, with limited effort, put together a data set for machine translation using the German editions and the Korean editions. We have them as PDF files, and maybe we can put them together and align them as a parallel corpus. This could be an interesting master thesis, for example. So furthermore, of course, we could add endless amounts and batteries of services here. Some of them are under development in separate parallel projects like Curator, for example, or the Lynx project. One of these is a workflow manager. I think other presentations talked about this. Clemens talked about this yesterday. So this is an important topic for us. The more and more services we get in the system, and there will be, and also in another project, European Language Grid, that we are heavily involved in, we will have hundreds of services for all sorts of purposes and domains and languages even, we need to find flexible ways of combining them. This is an important point, and we will look at this more closely in the future. And containerization of services, making them available to the public in a very easy way. And maybe at one of the next conferences I can provide an update on this. Thanks very much.
Quick question? No? Well, you answered my question already about go ahead. You answered my question already about the user study. So how was the user interface inspired? Did you just think of various things and try them? Or?
We had very informative discussions with the colleagues at Freie Universität, who said more or less what they think they needed, 2 or 3 iterations, and we need to add a few more things, as I said. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a suggestion for the Korean NER.
Mm-hmm.
If you have limited amounts of time or effort for annotation, I'd seriously consider retraining the DATeCH from Google for NER. But I also just found there's also a BLSTM-based NER for Korean on GitHub, which looks fairly active. So
okay.
Maybe I send you the information for that.
Great, excellent. Very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you.